I had been with the company for 16 years. I'd started as a junior analyst, barely out of college, with more ambition than I knew what to do with. Back then, it wasn't a massive corporation, like it is now, just a mid-sized consulting firm run by a sharp, practical CEO named Gerald Langston. Gerald was the kind of boss who noticed effort, rewarded results, and never played favorites. That was the era where merit still mattered. But everything changed after his sudden retirement and the moment his son, Chase Langston, was handed the reins of the empire his father had built. That's when the story of my unraveling began. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. To say Chase was underqualified would be a gross understatement. He had the charisma of a peeled potato and the leadership instincts of a sock puppet, a business degree from a top-tier university bought and paid for, and a trail of failed ventures followed him like a shadow. The board accepted him only out of obligation. Gerald still held sway behind the scenes, and the Langston name meant something. To them anyway. I was Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives, leading high-value transformations for Fortune 100 clients. My track record was spotless. Every project I touched generated millions. I'd trained half the executive team. I was next in line for a VP role that had been made clear to me over the past year. But a month after Chase took over, I was told I was being reallocated. Just like that. No explanation. Just a meeting in Chase's oversized office where he told me, through a smirk and without making eye contact, that I'd now be reporting to his new special advisor, someone fresh and hungry to learn. That someone turned out to be his own son, Bryce. Now Bryce, I still remember the first time I met him. He strolled into the office 2 hours late, holding a $12 coffee and wearing sneakers. That probably cost more than my car. He was 24, fresh out of college, and about as sharp as a spoon. Bryce thought KPI stood for kinda pretty idea, and once asked if quarterly reports came out 4 times a year, or just when they feel like it. He referred to me as his guy in meetings and once introduced me to a client as his strategy dude. I swallowed my pride and did the work. Not for him, but for the team, for the clients, for the people who still believed in getting results over playing politics. I sat through his ridiculous presentations and corrected his numbers before they could damage our credibility. I stayed late fixing his mistakes, walked him through quarterly analysis like I was teaching a toddler to read, and watched in silent rage as he took credit for work he didn't understand. But the final straw, that came during a budget review. It was a Thursday morning, and we were prepping for the annual audit, a deep dive assessment, our most important client, required before renewing their multi-year contract. Bryce, despite repeated warnings, had not prepared. He had no grasp of how our internal systems tied into the client's data pipelines. During a prep meeting, he pulled me aside and asked if I could just clean things up a little, like we did last year. Only, last year nothing was cleaned up. It was just accurate. This time though, there was a real issue. Unbeknownst to Bryce, or rather, ignored by him, we had been double billing a client for cross-departmental hours. It wasn't malicious at first, just a software sync issue between finance and operations. But once it was flagged, Bryce had chosen to ignore it. I had brought it up twice, submitted formal reports, even offered to walk him through the reconciliation process. His reply, "We'll fix it after the audit. No point in opening a can of worms." That wasn't just unethical, it was dangerous. So, I documented everything: emails, reports, call logs, meeting notes. I backed up files and printed records. And then I did what I should have done weeks earlier. I anonymously submitted the concerns to internal audit. 3 days later, the audit began, and almost immediately, the discrepancies surfaced. The auditors asked Bryce for detailed logs, and he panicked. He called me into a side room, pale and shaking, and asked me to Just make it go away. I stared at him. You mean cover it up? I asked. He said nothing. I walked out of the room and let the audit run its course. By day 2, the numbers were unraveling. The client's auditors had also been notified, since it was their money being mishandled. They weren't amused. By day 4, executive leadership had been pulled into emergency sessions. I sat quietly in the back of the room as Bryce fumbled through explanations. His hands trembled as he spoke. At one point, he blamed the data guy, me. But the auditors already had my documentation. They already knew. When they asked why previous warnings hadn't been addressed, they pulled up time-stamped messages, emails I'd sent directly to Bryce. The fallout came like a bombshell. Bryce was suspended indefinitely pending an investigation. The client froze all contracts and issued a public statement citing serious concerns over financial integrity. Our stock price dropped 12% overnight. The board, embarrassed and furious, demanded answers from Chase. Gerald, his father, was forced out of retirement to manage the crisis. And that's when the second bombshell dropped. Gerald didn't just come back. He came back with receipts. It turned out the client wasn't the only one being double billed. Bryce, with Chase's silent approval, had been inflating internal project hours to boost profit margins and report artificial growth to shareholders. They thought they were being clever. But Gerald had friends in places Chase never even thought to look. Former board members, senior compliance officers, even a forensic accountant from his old military contracts firm. In less than a week, the full scheme was laid bare. Chase was removed as CEO by a unanimous vote. Bryce was terminated. A class action lawsuit was filed by shareholders. The SEC got involved. And I was offered Chase's office. But I didn't take it. I turned down the role because something about that whole mess, the corruption, the nepotism, the systemic rot, made me realize just how much I'd been tolerating. I had spent years working for people who didn't see me, who thought they could buy loyalty, steal credit, and avoid accountability forever. I had built their empire for them, and they repaid me by putting a clueless kid in charge of my future. So I left, but not without a plan. 6 months later, I launched my own firm, lean, ethical, transparent, built on results, not favors. I hired the best people I knew, some who had walked away during the chaos, others who had been overlooked like I had been for years. We operated differently. We believed in truth. And the best part, that massive client we almost lost during the audit, they came to us. Not only did they leave Langston & Co., but they signed an exclusive contract with my new firm for 5 years, worth more than anything I ever earned at my old job. I remember sitting in my new office, months later, when Gerald Langston called me. He sounded tired, broken. "You were always the backbone," he said. I should have seen it. I didn't say much, just thanked him for the call. But when I hung up, I couldn't help but feel something more powerful than revenge. Freedom. Because in the end, they thought demoting me would silence me. They thought placing me under someone clueless would humiliate me. They thought protecting their own would keep their secrets safe. But they underestimated what happens when the quiet ones document everything. When integrity is mistaken for passivity, they forgot that people like me don't fold. We bide our time. We protect the truth. And when the moment comes, we don't shout. We just let the audit speak for itself. And when it hits like a bombshell, the ones who thought they held power finally realize they never really understood what power was. It wasn't in the corner office. It wasn't in the family name. It was in the work, in the quiet, in the one person they demoted, and who walked away with everything.